some peace and harmony in this whole thing by working together and coming to some kind of compromise. And I think that's all what we want is for the seed companies to be good neighbors with our local neighbors who are asking for reasonable things, and that's the word, reasonable. Yeah, like when they're worried about how the effect is on their kids and stuff. I guess my other request would be, from any one of you, there's a lot of concern about dust drift, pesticide drift at night, wind drift, dust drift. Do you think it's a reasonable request in some areas near neighborhoods, maybe even highways, that we enact some kind of, either in a resolution or state law, that defines what kind of windbreak or dust screen that would be reasonable? Route? Is that fair? I also want to follow up on the statement about the trees that are overlooking the Waimea Ridge from Pioneer, because myself and Councilmember Raposo was just there. I think that was last weekend on Saturday with the people from Makuele Poi. Not Makuele, no longer Makuele Poi, but the Aanas, and and we noticed that there was a tree line, and we could see the black fencing material. I guess that was done in response to public complaints about dust control. Is that?
Yes, we've had a dust fence there for quite some time, and the trees planted as well.
How long was it dust fence maybe there?
I'd need to look back, but okay. I'm thinking it was somewhere in the end of 2010 or early 2011.
And then you said that the trees were young, because they look dead. The trees on that right on that ridge that you can see from the bottom.
We'll take a look at that. I know there were 2 species of trees planted, and there's a drip irrigation line where they're planted, so certainly take a look at that.
But I'm just concerned that I'm hoping that after the class action lawsuit came, that Pioneer hasn't had the attitude that now they're suing us, so we'll no longer water the trees. I'm hoping that because for the trees to become that big, somebody was taking care of it. You can see it's strategically planted near that dust fence, yeah. and it's tall, so it was taken care of probably for some years, but now it looks dead. So maybe they're not watering it already. I guess my other request would be, from any one of you, there's a lot of concern about dust drift, pesticide drift at night, wind drift, dust drift. Do you think it's a reasonable request in some areas near neighborhoods, maybe even highways, that we enact some kind of, either in a resolution or state law, that defines what kind of windbreak or dust screen that would be reasonable?
Because I know I keep hearing about the label, but these labels are produced, and I'm assuming it's by the federal government. Are they cognizant of the Hawaii weather versus the mainland weather? Our winds are different. Obviously, you all know that. It's not like the flatlands of Texas or Iowa. We have the mountain breezes. We have winds that can change like that, and that's what makes Hawaii different. Are these labels, and I'm no label expert by far, but do these labels take into account the difference here in Hawaii versus wherever they test these things? I would agree to the drift potential of these particles, but as far as the change, and I guess more specifically, if a company notices the change in wind, so and that's I think the reason that a 72-hour notice of application doesn't work, because of the changes, the quick changes in wind. But the problem is if there is no plan 72 hours in advance to spray, and within that 72 hours or on the day of the spray, how does the people get notified currently that there's going to be some application of some pesticides? How is that done today? Or is that done today?
Currently, we do not.
So there is no disclosure at all?
We can, just to our employees, not to the general public.
We do address complaints. If we get a phone call, we follow up. We try to understand what the person's concern is.
Okay, but as far as taking a fuel or a portion of that fuel out of production, that's not something that you folks would do or would consider. Okay, and I'm just asking these questions because in the discussions I've had with the community, that's what they're asking for, is that, hey, and buffer zones around every single road and ditch, and that doesn't help. Some areas may require a larger buffer. Some areas may not need a buffer. And that's why I think the blanket buffer doesn't reach the desired results. Because I can tell you, Councilmember Kaua'i and I went up to Waimea Valley, and there's a field above the valley that buffer zone should be huge because of what we saw in the valley. And we saw the effects of what I believe is pesticides that are actually making its way down into the valley and browning up the banana trees. Our winds are different. I mean, obviously, you all know that. It's not like the flatlands of Texas or Iowa. We have the mountain breezes. We have winds that can change like that. And that's what makes Hawaii different. Are these labels, and I'm no label expert by far, but do these labels take into account the difference here in Hawaii versus wherever they test these things? Mr. Hoosier asked a series of questions as it relates to buffer zones and disclosure, but I didn't hear any positive response from the companies. And I guess my questions to each of you is, how much or how far can you all go to accommodate the requests of the community? The disclosure, I tend to agree with the disclosure. In buffer zones, you heard my assessment earlier that you cannot have a one-size-fits-all. And I would believe the same thing with disclosure, because I think each situation is different, each crop is different, the season is different, and I think it definitely warrants more investigation or at least analysis. But just start with disclosure. What are the companies willing to disclose? I think you've all heard the concerns of the community. I mean, everyone is very clear what the community wants. What are we willing to? What are you all willing to? How far, anyway, to accommodate the requests of the community that you folks hear loud and clear? And I'm talking about the community that's directly impacted by the operations. There's a huge segment of the testimony that we received, which is coming from the anti-GMO community. Worldwide, I've gotten emails from throughout the world. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the people that live next to these farms, the local families that are subject to pesticide contact. How far can you all go to accommodate their needs? Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that the focus on the community and community relations. How do we build that trust between the companies and the community?
Discussion is the people that are living next to the fields, the schools, the hospitals that are next to the fields. How can we successfully, positively meet their needs or their desires, and we can start with you.
So, Councilmember Raposo, we share the interest in having a better understanding. We are looking at, there's a state pesticide advisory board.
Yeah, there needs to be a vehicle to get there, and right now we don't have that vehicle. And
I think that we could have much better dialogue sitting around a table with the community